The Rolling Stones' Steel Wheels tour in 1989 really became the moment that architecture and stage design took rock and roll to a whole new level. And so we were starting to tour with these city-like set designs that would take up the full width of a stadium, and they would sort of transform the artist from being traditionally a sort of small thing in the middle of a field to this massive event. And this was probably the turning point in the industry. Fast forward about 10 years to U2 had Pop Mart, which was the first time people had started to use LED screens in live shows. But in this show, the pixels were about this far apart, which when you're at the other side of a stadium, they still look pretty high resolution. So the first time ever, the biggest video screen in scale. Slowly, as we started working through the years, we started to sort of take these ideas, these big structures that we were doing in rock shows, and put them into theatre shows. So Cirque du Soleil approached the studio, and we designed Car in Las Vegas. And this was this idea that rather than there being a stage and scenery, the stage should be the scenery, and the stage could move up and down. It could have people hanging from it, falling from it. It could rotate. It could be a wall. Why does it need to be a stage? A stage isn't a stage necessarily. So we got approached by the Beijing Olympics to design the opening and closing ceremonies. So for the opening ceremony, we designed this massive sphere that would come out of the floor, and people would run around it, of course. So this would rise out the floor. It all cascaded together like a Chinese lantern, and then it would come up. And it was kind of about 30 meters tall. It was quite a big thing, and people would be held by a sort of harness, and they would run on the thing. And we had to sort of figure out how that would work. So we did workshops, and you know, what's the best surface, what kind of shoes do you have to wear, all those kind of things. And here it is in sort of construction. You can see it's sort of massive, kind of crazy. But it's about performance. It's about how you take people and give them something different to do so that the audience sees this sort of amazing thing that couldn't have been done by just standing on the floor. For us, architecture is not just a building. For us, an audience isn't just the people that sit in the seats. The building and the audience and the building itself and its surroundings, they're all part. The audience is the city, and the people in the city, and how you visit the building. The show starts before you even get in the building. So this building has 18,000 red discs, they're about this big. Each one has 4 LEDs, and it's a low-resolution video screen. So during the day and during the night, the outside skin of the building sort of does its own little show. So it's pretty wild, this building. So how do we come up with an idea? That's the sort of real question. Like, where does it come from? Do we just go, oh, I think we should make a thing? Or no, well, sometimes it's that, and sometimes it's the client saying, I'd like a castle. Lady Gaga said, I would like a castle to go on tour with. And we said, a stone castle? And she said, yes. I said, that's a bit heavy to go on tour with a stone castle. And so, you know, we ended up making a styrofoam castle that looked like stone. But it was a sort of interesting conversation. So I was going to sort of take you through this one, which was quite an interesting series of projects. U2 came to us in 2013 and said, we're writing an album called The Songs of Innocence. It's about our childhood. It's about us growing up in Dublin, and Bono and the band meeting and living on Cedarwood Road. And we want to tell the story of that. Oh, and by the way, within that time, my mother died. There was some bombs in Ireland. And we then moved to London, and we felt very divided from the world. And we actually divided the whole room down the middle. So there was a main stage, there was a very long catwalk with a screen above it, which you could play within or on top of or inside of. And then there was a sort of round stage at the other end. So the audience started to get a whole new way of dealing with a show. Where do you look? It's not predictable. How do you sell the tickets? All these kind of questions came into this. You know, when you have Bono standing on a platform that's floating in front of you in the middle of the room, it's sort of magical. And so it pushes rock and roll and architecture and show design to a whole new level, which is partly linked to the design of the products that are available and also down to the ambition of the story. So this is just starting to show that, you know, really, and I'll show another example in a minute, the idea of a live show is changing slowly. We ended up meeting Mumford & Sons just after the Joshua Tree tour, and they wanted an equal experience that really was visceral for the crowd, that would allow their new album that was going to be called The Delta to play out. And we had really no idea. We never worked with them. And they were like, so, just you know, what do you do? And I'm like, well, it doesn't really kind of work like that. You need to tell us what's the album about, or what is it you're trying to do, or why are you trying to do it? And so they said, okay, well, we just really want to connect with the crowd. So we started looking at, this is sort of how we start sometimes with what we call a grey card 3D model, modeled in Rhino. And so we sort of started with something that looks a little bit like U2. It's a stage at one end with a long catwalk with a B stage, and then some additional little stages. And we were like, please don't pick this, because this is like really boring. And then, so slowly we started to say, well, what if there's not a catwalk? What if you walk through the crowd and you get to this stage in the middle? Or actually, what if the stage in the middle was much bigger and the stage at the other end is smaller? And actually, do we even need a stage at the other end? What if it was just a really long stage down the middle of the room? But actually, even this, we've sort of seen it before, it's been done. What if we actually rotated the stage and put it the way across the room, connecting the sides of the audience, putting all the action in the middle, and then you have all the people on the floor. And so they were like, oh, that sounds really original and cool. Carrying on with Beyoncé, another sort of continuation of the same conversation. How do we get further out into the room? How do we touch more audience members? How do we connect with people in a stadium? In an arena, there's 15,000 seats. In a stadium, there's 80,000 seats or 100,000 seats. So based again on the sort of Joshua Tree model of a very big video screen, because they'd seen it and they loved that, they were like, how do we go further? And we want to have a band, we want to have 27 people and an energy of that band, and how do we get further into the room? And how do we tell the story of our marriage, of being apart, of coming back together, all that kind of thing. So again, the narrative is driving these ideas. It's not just, let's make the biggest screen, let's make the most expensive whatever. So this was the stage. It was 60 meters wide, which, to put into scale, I live on a street in King's Cross that has about 15 houses across, and it's about as big as my street. And we're touring that around the world. And not only are we touring around the world, this screen opens and closes in 1.5 minutes. No, less, about 30 seconds. So we had the real stage, and then we have this massive piece of stage here. And the notion of the duality and the separation between the two artists was so that actually we want to go far into the house, but we don't want to just do a traditional center catwalk or a U-shape or an N-shape or whatever. So we came up with this idea of these two catwalks. She could tell her story, he could tell his story. They could see each other across the gap, but they wouldn't be able to get to each other. And eventually they could rekindle the marriage. They could be reborn, and then they could track out. So within the space in the middle, which was a place called Club Carter, it was about 1,000 VIPs, and everybody else was around the edge. This whole piece of stage would lift up and track over the audience, which is pretty amazing. Again, some renderings. So the idea was the video screen could open. They would come down on this amazing lift. You would see the band in silhouette, like a 4-story building. They might be able to come out of the doors left and right so that they could sort of have this separation. They could walk down the catwalks. You could have 27 people in there, just the musicians, or you could have the 20 dancers, or you could have all of them. And we could do these sort of great effects. And then the bridge would come up and track over the audience like that.